Alright, so today let's go make the roux. Did it fail? So all you need is butter or any animal fats, like I said in my last video. There's three types or three colors of roux. White roux, blonde roux, and brown roux. Right? They're all the same, but the difference is just the cooking time. How high or how long you cook them, or how hot it. Another key thing to understand is we're dealing with starches, is you have to understand how to cook the starches so it doesn't create or doesn't give you lumps in cooking. Starches is thickened by gelatinization. It's the starch granules. What happens in the process is the starch granules or something like that. They absorb in water and I guess they thick. The goal is to cook the starch before you add liquid. You don't want to use too cold of a liquid because that will straight create lumps. You don't want to use too hot of a liquid either. I think it's just might be destroy the sauce. This one's kind of complicated. You really need to do this, experience this. Knowing this is not enough. We use white stock for velouté, right? That's the liquid for that sauce. We use the brown stock for Espagnole or Espagnole. And we use milk for Bechamel. We use tomato juice, tomato something, that's the liquid for that anyways. This is for tomato sauce. And we use clarified butter or butter for hollandaise, right? These are the 5 sauces that soon I'm gonna try making and hopefully teach it to you. I gotta teach it to myself first. Mostly the equal parts for flour and butter is normally, it's the same, right? You use 1-to-1 ratio. Let's say you put 6 ounces of butter, you're gonna use 6 ounces of flour too. The liquid you're gonna use is about 4 liters or 1 gallon. But for me, like I said, I barely measure mine. That's why most of the time I fail. Right now, I have a stock here heating, because I'm just gonna include that in the roux making. What you'll need is a heavy bottom thick pan and a pot that has thick bottom. The best advice if you wanna make white sauces is you don't wanna just pick a stainless. I'm just using a stock here, alright? This is the fat to velouté, okay? First thing is heat up your pan, low heat to medium. The first step is cooking the butter, okay? Melt that butter, alright? You don't wanna use really low heat, especially when you're making Espagnole or something. And now that it's cooked, we're gonna add our flour. Okay? Okay, the reason why you want it in low heat is because you don't want to burn it. If you really want to cook that flour, I'll show you what it looks like when it's kind of like grainy, because that's the thing you want it to be, right? You see how sand, or you just imagine the sand. That's the texture. The goal of the white roux is literally just cook the starch off. So now, as you can see, that's the white roux. If I just keep heating it up, it'll just go to a different color until it becomes Espagnole. So this is the thickener when you're making a sauce. There's 2 ways you can use this when making a sauce. The first step is by cooking the flour and adding the liquid. So right now what I'm gonna do is make a velouté out of it. So yeah, remember what I said is when we're adding liquid to it. So the liquid should not be too cold, or should not be too hot. Right, then I'm just gonna keep mixing. I don't have a small whisk, I'm sorry. We're gonna be off the heat too, and we're gonna slowly just add the water, just keep whisking it. And yeah, you want it to be simmering or like bubbling a bit before you add another liquid. Yeah, it's coming nice and nice. So this is the blonde roux that I can make a velouté out of it. That's all gonna matter how thick you want your sauce to be. Right? You can always thin it down, or you can always thicken it down. Keep cooking it in low heat. Most of the time you have to like simmer that for 10 minutes. So yeah, this is the first way you can make a thick sauce, and you can just add liquid until you get the desired consistency. Alright, it looks like bechamel, but nah, it's kind of blonde. So yeah, that's the first way of like adding thickener to the sauces, is you start with literally making the roux. Sometimes people use animal fats or any fats, and then they sweat or they saute anything with it. Spices, aromatics, vegetable or anything. After that, they add the starch. You've probably seen that in a lot of sauce making. Then you add the liquid in the roux. That's the first way you can add the thickener, is from the beginning. Especially when you're serving an a la carte restaurant. You're serving from a customer to customer. Right? As you're gonna make the sauce, the pan sauce. Another way we can incorporate the roux is when we put it at the end of the cooking. This is the second way we can incorporate the roux. This thing happens in the restaurant most of the time. Especially restaurant who makes big batches of sauce. That's what they do, is they simmer, they heat it up the liquid. They use any fats and flour. Then they add the thing at the end of the cooking, right? And just by swirling that. So when we're thickening the liquid, we don't want to boil it down too much, because it'll thin down the roux. It'll destroy the roux. Other important things to save you is always use the room temperature water. Most of the thickeners like cornstarch, they work in those, right? This thing called whitewash, and it's basically flour and water. Never ever use that in your cooking. Okay, it's just gonna create lumps, and I think everyone who started cooking, that's the first thing they thought that works, but it don't. So the only funny thing I didn't measure is my liquid, so I'm not sure it's gonna thicken up, like, you know, but it's getting there. So yeah, that's how you really make a roux. So the thing about roux is how can you tell if you made a good roux? Good roux should be stiff, runny, and should be like a sand. That's what I learned from my boss and my manager when I used to work. Like, don't worry, there's easy ways to separate the starch granules, or to, you know, not to mess up. The first one is mixing the starch with fats. That's why I'm talking about roux, because this is one of the most we're gonna use a lot in cooking. So the other thing is mixing it with cold liquid. And an example is, you know how you're just gonna finish your sauce and you add cornstarch and water. That's called a slurry, and that works. You might really want to do a lot of research. You want to use the right thickeners and the right, you know, sauces and stuff. I'll say it again, there's a lot of thickeners out there. There's waxy maize. This one I learned today is it works with if you froze the sauce. What it does, that starch, is they don't break the sauce compared to the other starch. Slurry, which is cornstarch, is best for, you know, meat dishes, even for sweets. That's what I learned. There's this thing called santangam. I hear it a lot in cooking. I think it's in everything. The best thing about it is it doesn't add any flavor compared to like the flour and starches. It gives the starches, but you have to cook it. There's even arrowroot. You can even use breadcrumbs. So if you use breadcrumbs, your sauce will be more thicker, as twice as all-purpose flour. Because in the breadcrumbs, the starch are already cooked. There's this thing called liaison. Alright, there's even a beurre or there's rice flour, there's potato starch. I'm just explaining it to you because maybe next time we'll do that. And yeah, I'm gonna try to teach you how to make bechamel, velouté, and make sauce out of it. Fuck, I talk too much, did I?